Back in China, the debt bubble is about to burst. As we speak, a crisis is spiraling. Chinese provinces are on the verge of default. Their borrowings are extremely high, and they're not being able to pay back. I have some numbers. China has 31 provinces. 17 of them face a debt crisis. Their outstanding loans are well over 120% of their incomes. What does that mean? Simply put, their loan piles are bigger than their income, at least 120% more. So the risk of default is quite high. And it's not just one or two provinces. More than 50% of China's provinces are in crisis. They face a financial crunch. But how did they end up here? By wasteful spending. It's all linked to China's infrastructure boom. When the times were good, these provinces tried to ride the wave. They launched several infrastructure projects. They came up with fancy ways to raise money. They were called local government financing vehicles, LGFVs, local government financing vehicles. What were these? Basically, these were companies to raise cash. They issued bonds. These companies were backed by a local government. And that money then was pumped into infrastructure projects. But why do you need such companies at all? Can local governments not borrow directly? Well, they can, but there are certain restrictions. But if governments go through a firm or an LGFV, there is no restriction on borrowing. So the local governments kept taking out loans. They kept borrowing more and more money. And now the bill is due. How much do these local governments owe? China has never been transparent with numbers, so answering this question is a bit tricky, but we do have some estimates. These companies, LGFVs, have issued bonds to the tune of $2 trillion. That's 40% of China's corporate bond market, $2 trillion. Another report throws up different numbers. It says the local government debt is much higher than $2 trillion. How much higher? A whopping $5 trillion at the end of 2022. Experts say these LGFVs have borrowed off the books too, meaning some of the loans will not show up on their balance sheets. And of course, not all of these loans will be in distress. But remember, more than 50% of the provinces in China are short of cash, so a large chunk of the loans could go bad, and that would be embarrassing for China. Because companies defaulting on loans is one thing, but default by a government is another ballgame altogether. That would put Chinese provinces in the league of Sri Lanka and Pakistan, governments going broke. Both these countries, Sri Lanka and Pakistan, are seeking a bailout from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and both countries are imploding. In Sri Lanka, the debt crisis led to a government's collapse. There was an alarming shortage of essentials. Pakistan is headed in the same direction, and now China is showing signs of stress. Let me tell you what local reports say. Some local governments in China cannot pay their bills anymore. In Shenzhen, for instance, salaries of teachers have been cut. In Dalian and Wuhan, there have been protests. Pensioners took to the streets here. Why? Because their health insurance was slashed by the government. Beijing will have to step in. And next week is going to be critical. The Chinese parliament is set to meet. This is an annual affair. It happens every year. The entire Communist Party leadership will be present. But will they agree to a bailout? Will Beijing bail out local governments in China? So far, it has been reluctant. Earlier, the Chinese Finance Ministry had issued a statement. It had a message for local governments. This is what it said. Listen to this. If it's your baby, you should hold it yourself. The central government won't bail you out. That was the message from Beijing. But now this crisis is reaching epic proportions. Governments in more than half of China's provinces are running out of cash. And this is not a headline that China would like to see. Also, without a bailout, there could be more protests and market chaos. China's economy is already faltering. Whatever the Communist Party decides, it is now being confronted with a harsh reality. China's prestige as an economic power is on the line.